This week I was lucky enough to preview a new exhibition at the Tate Britain called Women in Revolt, Art and Activism in the UK 1970 to 1990. It's billed as something of a landmark exhibition exploring how interconnected networks of women use radical ideas and rebellious methods to make an invaluable contribution to British culture. We were treated to an introduction by the curator herself, Linsey Young.
Loud women!
There's two reasons I wanted to make the show. The first is because, there's many, but the first is because I wasn't taught this art history. So I went to the University of Glasgow and the University of Manchester, graduated last in 2007, and I wasn't taught about these women. And I started to think about, when I got this job, I've been here 8 years, British curator, contemporary British art, I don't know about it. I don't know about these women. So it kind of felt like a duty to find out. And the other reason is it's a celebration for my mother, who died 3 years ago. And I wanted to make the show for her because she was a working class woman, super left wing, a nurse, hilarious, lived with a disability, died too young because I'd say men, but that's just me. But, lived with a lot of inequality. And I wanted to show that the women of her generation, even if they look normal, are generally fabulous and have some dark secret somewhere, some creative endeavour. Be that crochet, be that being in a band called Fist Fuck, whatever it is, they've got it. So there are over 100 artists in the show. There are about 112, 14 individual artists, and if you count collectives, there are almost 140. And that's a lot. But when I was talking to Linda about it a few months ago, she said, out of scarcity comes excess, Linsey. Like, just go for it, just do it. And I've kind of stuck to that, because I think if you're given this space, just fill it. Like, you don't know when you're going to get it again. So I might have made the wrong decision, but you can work that out yourself. I'd also say it's not in any way a definitive history of the time. There are, I'd say, 3 exhibitions you could make with the same title, with totally different artists. But I've chosen to look at the things that I'm interested in. So that is socialist politics, Marxist politics, anti-capitalism, independent music, the people who are marginalised. Like, those are the ones who I wanted to bring forward in this exhibition. Also, really importantly, it's about constellations, not stars. I really am bored of this art historical, patriarchal privileging of people over others, and I think by showing a constellation of people, you can kind of pick the things you like. You can make your own answers and find your own journey through the exhibition. There's a huge range of media across the show, so there's I think there was a worry internally that it would be quite boring and not boring, no one said that, quite archival, quite heavy. But actually there is painting, there is sculpture, there is moving image. That sound is a woman giving birth. There's this whole host of different kind of practices to look at. And what else is important? Yeah, a lot of it comes from cupboards. So many of these women weren't able to sustain their archives or look after their artwork because of finance, because of precarity of housing, and so a huge amount of conservation work has been done to kind of bring it back, which is very exciting. Also, all of the gaze is a woman's gaze, so there are all the documentary photography, all the things that have been made by women. So that's quite unusual. I think we work really hard to make sure that the documentary photography in the catalogue as well is all taken by a woman. Outside of the house, we've got a flag on the roof by Rosemary Kelsey, which is a work she initially made for Battersea Power Station in the 70s. We have Bobby Baker's house outside, which I'm sure you're going to see, this amazing installation. We've made a podcast, we made a record, thank you Julie and her team, and we're really just trying to take up as much space as we possibly can, and share lots of different points of view, because a lot of the women in this show completely disagree with each other on really fundamental things, but that doesn't matter because they're still able and happy to share space and to hold those discussions. So I think that's a really important part of the show. Do you want me to talk about each room, or is that a lot of information? Very quickly. So, Notice the room titles. I'm very proud of the room titles. So this room is called Rising with Fury, and it's about following the timeline about the very early 1970s through to the mid-70s. So thinking about early conferences, early collective actions, performance artists who were just kind of coming up, exhibitions that were shut down by the police because policemen thought they were so controversial because they had drawings of boobs and photographs of vulvas, outrageous. Work about pay, and then the second room, I'm really quick now, the second room is called The Marxist Wife Still Does the Housework, which is a kind of aping of a title by Alexis Hunter. And it's about the maternal experience and the domestic experience, but very much seeing it as something you can rip up and pull apart and put back together again. So we have Linda in that room, we have Gina Birch from the Raincoats, screaming, this wonderful work she made in 1977. We have a woman giving birth. And we have a 2-meter-high labia made out of carpet. So there is something for everyone. The third room is called Our Bondage Up Yours, of course, out of respect for polystyrene, Marianne Elliott Said. And we have her work in the show. So we have one surviving artwork by polystyrene that's there. We also have work by the Neo-Naturists, by Jill Westwood, who's in a band called Fistfuck, who her practice was being a dominatrix. So there's these extraordinary photos of her at work. Cozy Fan Tutti across 2 rooms, the kind of punk bondage room, and the next one about maternal and bodily experience. We have Linda, we have Polly Desai, who is one of the youngest artists in the show, who's a kind of really brilliant young, well, she's in her late 50s now, but lesbian punk woman of colour working at that time. Who else? You'll see. There's loads of women. Then we go to a room about Green and Common. So thinking about that site as a space for women coming together for their protest, for them also thinking about how to live in non-heteronormative kind of nuclear ways. Like a lot of women I've spoken to came out after going to Greenham or moved into kind of different kinds of ways of living after sharing that camp together. We have banners by an artist called Thalia Campbell, whose granny was a suffragette, and she learned to make banners with her and then continued to make with her whole career. And amazing laminated poster exhibition, which was sent out to community centres all over the country, which is brought back together here. Then there's a room called Black Women Time Now, which is a very big room split into 2, and it really focuses on the early to mid-80s and thinking about the changing face of British culture, and particularly the visibility of black artists of colour, black feminist artists of colour. So the first room looks at the context of things like rebellions, uprisings, the Scarman Report, police brutality, sus laws, stop and search laws, and how women pushed against that. And the second half looks at women of colour's creativity, connectivity, passion, beauty, and tries to expand that out. So we have work by Nina Edge, which is on the cover of a very important book called Passion by Maud Salter, and the work by Nina was thought lost, but we have brought it back together for this exhibition, which is very exciting. And we have work by Rita Keegan. So Rita Keegan is an amazing artist of colour, and she uses her family history to kind of reinsert the joy of her body, her community into the space. And in our podcast, there's this really beautiful quote where she says, the reason that I put my face in my work again and again is because when little black girls come to the gallery, I want them to see themselves here. And so that's very much the kind of spirit of that room. The final room is called No Such Thing as Society, of course after Thatcher's famous quote where she's celebrating, capitalism and individualism and all that brilliant stuff that served us really well over the past decades. And the room really focuses on lesbian reaction to Section 28 and the AIDS epidemic. So very much thinking about how lesbians fought for visibility with extraordinary humour in the face of devastation of their communities. And we end on a room that celebrates the single mother who, of course, struggled all the time, particularly in the late 80s moment, and also looks at the effect that the emerging commercial market would have on her. artists. So a lot of the women I spoke to, which is most of them, said that the emergence of the YBA movement in the late 80s, through no fault of the artists, really had an effect on the practice because attention went over there and not to them. What's interesting about that is that Saatchi and Saatchi made the advert "Labour Isn't Working" that scholars have said got Thatcher in, pushed her over the line, and they are then the first people buying and trading their work. So there's this really interesting relationship between capitalism and commerce and this radical practice.
Loud women!
My colleague Billy Reeves caught up with Linsey for some further questions.
So my name is Linsey Young and I'm curator of British Contemporary Art at Tate.
There's a thin line, isn't there, between contemporary art and social history at this exhibition. How have you managed to unblur those lines?
I'm not sure I have, and I think I'm kind of equally passionate about both, and I think it's hard to understand art without its context, and it's really important to understand your history. I think especially for feminists or activists of any kind, to know the work that's gone before so that you can build on it rather than reinventing the wheel.
Okay. Explain to us what we can see in this particular room and what the exhibition is all about.
So this is the first exhibition. It's called Rising with Fury, and it's about the very early moments of the women's liberation movement in the UK. So you can see what I hope is a very elegant room with wooden partitions that we created an exhibition space that harks back to the 1970s, or spaces like the ICA.
Yeah.
And you can see a huge amount of work, photographs of conferences, paintings of women, photographs of performance, and behind me a series of postal artworks, which were small objects that women made at the kitchen table and then posted to each other.
Much of this action, if we're talking certainly the Brunswick strike and women's liberation, happened in London. What's here that is specifically about London?
Yes, I mean, I tried. I'm Scottish, so I tried to make it as broad across the country as I could. Yeah. But there was a reason people come to London, right? There's a reason that weirdos escape to London when they're 17, like I tried to. And specific to London, I'm trying to think.
Well, there's the punk scene, I guess, Regina Birch.
Well, punk was big in Leeds as well.
Oh, right,
so there was a lot
yeah.
going on with Leeds, with Chyla Berman, and Chutpa Biswas was engaged with the punk scene. But you're right, I think polystyrene, or the work of the neo-naturists who were going to the Fridge in Brixton and going to the Blitz, those kind of things, really important. Also, the exhibitions you will see in... the Hackney Flashers work in room 2. Okay. It's a laminated exhibition and it charts or looks at childcare, and it's specific to London, and in fact you can still identify streets in London on it, so yeah, it's very local.
Finally from me, how do you gauge success as a curator at Tate Britain? Is it bums on seats? Is it legs through doors? Is it the subcultural capital of it all? Is it press and radio? How do you gauge whether or not this has been a success or not?
That's such a good question. For me, success is if the artists are happy.
Right.
I'm responsible to them, of course, to the institution and to the public, but if the artists go away happy, then we've done a good job.
Has anything in here got a financial value?
Everything has a financial value, but I think it's interesting not to think about that so much and actually think about what our art world would look like if we cared about that a bit less.
Loud women!
Also visiting the preview was our dear friend Helen McCookerybook, who was visiting on behalf of Radio 4. So Billy took the opportunity to ask her thoughts on the exhibition too.
Because what I'm interested in is why you're here. So from a radio point of view, formal radio, can you say your name and your job title?
Which name?
Which name do you use when you're broadcasting on the BBC, Helen?
Well, Samira just called me McCookerybook, so I suppose I am that, yeah.
Just that then?
Yeah.
So can you say your name and your role?
Well, I'm Helen McCookerybook, and today's role is I'm reporting for Samira Ahmed for Radio 4's Front Row.
I'm interested in this context, this law, is Front Row's target audience, right? Who would you say listens to Radio 4's Front Row? And secondly, why would they be interested in this?
Well, me, when there are things on Front Row that interest me, because Samira's she's a real cultural force. I was thinking how much she must have inside her head because if you listen to her programme, she's very knowledgeable about every person that she interviews.
It's about the arts and theatre in general.
It's about the arts and music. I mean, last week she did a feature on two-tone.
Okay.
She interviewed the author Daniel Rachel, who was actually too young to be around at that period, but he's really good at listening to people and picking up what makes a movement happen and how the different aspects of a movement intersect to create something that's really powerful. So she interviewed him, and also Pauline Black, who was in a band called The Selector, and she's a very unusual. Whenever I've met Pauline, she's actually a real introvert doing an extrovert. As a performer, she's really extrovert. And in a very similar way to Rhoda Dakar, who was also part of that
Body
movement.
snatchers,
She's really contrarian. So if you ask a question, you don't know what you can't expect, you can't anticipate what the answer is.
So that's interesting. So when you're talking about heritage stuff, heritage art, heritage music, our generation has kind of moved into Radio 4's target audience age-wise, would you say? Because if you're talking two-tone and you're talking the over 50s.
Yeah, I think some have, but you've also got to remember that there's this kind of borderline, very right-wing kind of cohort of people of our generation who also have to be catered for by the media. And I think it's quite interesting because shows like Front Row resist that. Through wearing the gloves of art and music and theatre, which is, it's a very kind of.
Is it the establishment allowing a little bit of Marxism?
I think it's more than that. It's a respect for a very knowledgeable presenter who does a lot of research and who understands the fact that they are actually resisting by doing what they're doing. And I mean, some resistance is very loud, and the resistance in this exhibition is very loud, but some resistance is very quiet, and it opens the door quietly and sneaks in and gets a place at the table, and that's equally as important, because my experience of being an artist and musician is that if you shout, sometimes people just put their hands over their ears. And
it's hectoring and preaching to the crowd we were talking about.
And what I particularly like about this exhibition is first of all, it's two things in one. It's the amount of accessible media that people used. So it's paper, it's things that in your kitchen you could reach for, or at work you could reach for. You could get to the photocopier, or you could reach across the kitchen and get a piece of paper and do something. And it's, small posters, zines, badges, those kind of things where people are thinking their art straight onto the paper, which is really spontaneous and it's unmediated. They didn't have to get sponsorship from anybody to do it. They stole the photocopier paper.
I guess a lot of it originally wasn't art. It becomes art because it's in an art gallery.
Yeah. I mean, the reason of having three identities is because people really attack you if they think you're overstepping your mark, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
And
I spoke to Vic Reeves about exactly this recently. You're allowed to have more than one idea.
Yeah. So my way of dealing with that is to divide my output into different areas, but you never know who's paying attention to what you do. Yeah. And I think, like a lot of the artists here, everything comes out spontaneously, and then you decide what's going to be the vehicle for that,
I wonder if the answer to that question is it's because it's at the Tate Britain. I mean, this really legitimises it, doesn't it? If this was in, the Cube in Hackney or whatever it's called, then it would be dismissed perhaps as a little bit crank. But the fact that it's in here legitimises it, would you say?
I think it does, but I think the seeds of this were... I mean, I absolutely loved Hugh Locke's exhibition here, the Carnival parade that he did. I just kept coming back and looking at it. That was
the one that was in the main hall.
In the main hall, and I think, I think it's absolutely essential to recognise the power. And what's good about this exhibition is collecting together a load of women activists who might not have realised the power of who they were until this actually happened. I'm going around and I'm seeing. I used to work with her, and I know her, and it's really funny because the tendency with political activism is to put it into silos and to say, oh, well, you know, that happened, and it makes it weak. So if you join together all of the bits of the jigsaw in an exhibition like this, you can see there's a massive amount of strength. And I've almost cried at several points, you know, just realising how strong some of the artists
and also the grief that they went through at Greenham and Graham McMurray.
Well,
does it make a difference?
Oh yeah,
political activism
massively. And I mean, I've got two daughters who are both quite active. They, you know, they support various different political causes, and they're both artists in different ways. And it's also in the way they are. Like, one of them works in the fashion industry and has a lot of trans friends and a lot of queer friends, and but she doesn't even notice, if you see what I mean. And it's that kind of thing of not saying, look at this extraordinary thing I'm doing by performing the way that... And this is what the spontaneity of this... It's the power of this. It's that there are very few examples of anybody performing their art. There are examples of people realising they're having to perform their gender, but that's really different. It's like people absolutely opening their souls, baring their souls, and creating words and film and art.
But that's personal activism to change your... I mean, I'm talking about group activism, because there has to be a certain amount of violence and fear from the authorities to change things. I mean, you've seen a little bit of that here.
Well, yes, I think I noticed the lesbians in support of the miners. And that's where you really get a lot of... I mean, that's why Rock Against Racism was so powerful. And I mean, I was actually directly, you know, performing at that time. And so you would know that within the Rastafarian culture, for instance, there were things that didn't make you feel particularly comfortable as a white woman. But you also understood that resisting the things that were oppressing you collectively was more important than those divisions that you might have felt that were cultural divisions. So being from an outsider culture, if you collected together with other people from an outsider culture and didn't...
A common enemy?
Yeah, a common enemy, but through creativity.
Music has been important in this exhibition as well, isn't it? Why is that?
Well, because music gets under people's skin, and you can hate... I mean, most women, for instance, will have at least one really, really misogynist record that they really like because the music's so great. And it does make you question your own, how messages are delivered to you. And how they're delivered to you effectively, and how they can get under your skin through, you know, the power of art, music and theatre and writing and all of poetry, all of these things. And it teaches you as a kind of observer or a participant in culture to be like a tide coming and going. So you'll flow into something and you'll sort of say, but that's not right, that doesn't feel right, and you flow back and you think about it. So the next time you flow forward, you're thinking, but I've processed that and I think this, you know. And you understand how powerful you are. I mean, it's really powerful to be somebody who comes to something like this. There's somebody clicking, and how many people are coming? Shall we do this again?
Exactly,
it's really important to be visible and to go and make your presence felt in something like this, and to sort of process what you see, whether or not you like it. It's really important to be a participant in culture, especially when it's a culture that involves so much political thought. A massive, you know, it sounds really patronising to sort of say how astonishing the amount of thought and processing of politics and culture and gender and
different mediums
and different expertise in different media and experimenting, finding new ways of doing things and funniness, horrific funniness. I mean, there's that artwork there of the guy the white guy with the dog that's his penis. I mean, that's one of the best pieces of artwork. And, I see the things, I think, I wish I'd thought of that.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to go away and I'm going to think, right, I've got to, because you see something as stimulating as this and you just think, I've got to carry on doing stuff, and I've got to rethink this and rethink that. And
Loud Women!
Accompanying the exhibition is a compilation record out now on neon yellow vinyl, and it's also out on the streaming services. It's a release that, it says here, it aims to compile tracks from some of the most trailblazing and often unsung women working in UK music between 77 and 85. What a period. It's called Women in Revolt, and we're going to be reviewing it, I think, on the site in more detail soon, so look out for that. It's quite a record featuring several of the artists who are involved in the exhibition: Cosy Fanny Tootie, Linda Sterling, Gina Birch, of course, from the Raincoats, and Polystyrene from X-Ray Specs. It's also got a really cool playlist to accompany the exhibition, kind of bringing it up to date with lots of bands that we're more familiar with at Loud Women, bands like Big Joni and Hot Wax, so kind of bringing the musical struggle up to date. The exhibition is on at the Tate Britain now until the 7th of April, so plenty of time to get up there, and I think I'm going to have to go up there at least one more time again, because there was so much there I didn't get to see nearly half of it.
Loud Women!
I'm Cassie Fox, this is Loud Women, thanks for listening.